I'm gonna hop on this gratefulness, grace, whatever, gratitud train that everyone, everyone on Instagram seems to be in, and like TikTok. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that it's a pretty nice initiative to keep us reminded of our privilege and the good things that are happening in our lives, especially when things get tough and confusing and complicated, and as we grow. um so I think I'm gonna start doing this because I know I've been complaining a lot lately, at least to myself, because you don't know, because probably don't know who I am, but I've been complaining a lot to myself about how confusing my future got all of a sudden, because it was also my mistake to think that everything was kind of a given, because you know as a scholarship child, I thought I had a pretty solid path forward. But I think a part of me was always aware that the opportunities were gonna run out eventually. And I think in the sense that things being easy and given, and I don't want to be kind to myself, because it's like when I got my first scholarship, it's not like that was easy. Like, that was also a process, and that process took years of forming myself into the person that I was when I applied for these grants, and then kind of fitting a profile that no one could have prepared me for. Only the kind of course that my life took could have prepared me for the life and the lies, because I did have lies in like school, but for the life. What I mean to say is that only the life course I had up until that point could have prepared me for the life that was following, or that would have come to me afterwards. And so, yeah, so I think, um, I don't know. I think there's just so many thoughts right now, but yeah. I guess this is what happens when you get yourself to a certain point in life where you're like, you kind of become confident in the kind of person that you are, which is shitty, because I thought that was always the goal, to really get to know myself and be able to look at myself and say, this is the things that I am, this is who I am. You know, I am smart, and I get scholarships, and I do philosophy, and I write poetry. Like, this is my thing. These are the four main things about me that no one can take away. And suddenly all of them are just kind of not happening anymore. Um, I write poetry here and there, but even the poetry that I've been writing is just not inspiring me, or I write it because I look at myself and I'm like, I haven't written anything in so long. What is happening? This is my thing. Let me write something, and that makes it just unfulfilling and shitty. And also, it's the fear of losing the habit and losing the capacity to make the art that kind of pushes me to do it, but it's just not feeling the same as it was at some point. Um, and truth be told, I've been painting a lot more and drawing a lot more than doing poetry, which is like kind of what the first time in my life. It's like a year ago from now. It's when I started dabbling in this other creative medium, and it's great. And sometimes that just helps me express myself better than poetry. Um, but yeah, it's just like something different, right? It's not something that yet feels like my thing, because poetry I've been writing since I was 13. You know, painting, I've been painting for less than a year. And it's not something that people know me for. Like, a lot of people know me because of my poetry. At least a lot of my friends in my inner circle and things like that. That's what they associate me with. And I think having that community that can also associate me with something, like being recognizable in the world, not just out of recognition, like, oh, fame and whatever, but the sense that I have something to communicate to others, and it's like, okay, through this thing, this is the thing that I do, and that they can recognize me through that. Even though I just read this, we were just reading this assignment for environmental ethics, talking about like, well, kind of the thinking behind consuming and products and everything, and it just kind of evoking this idea that the products that we use in our daily lives have kind of this personalities, let's say, like they have these attitudes through which we can communicate. Like the language, they create a language that they also embody in a sense. So it makes me think of this poetry thing because it's kind of like a label. It's kind of like a brand, you know, like I don't have to do anything and I don't have to be a person. I don't have to live as long as this brand is out there and that it can go across my face and I can communicate all these things like, oh, I'm artistic and I read and I write and I'm sentimental and it's like there's all these things that are encompassed in the fact that I write poetry, you know. And similarly with the other tags that define me, like there's all these things encompassed within the fact that I am a philosophy major, you know, that I study philosophy. It gives already this vibe like, oh yeah, then you must be like an intellectual and you must read and you must do all these things. And it again can speak for me. And I'm kind of shy sometimes, you know, I don't want to speak for myself. So it's great that I was able to build a life that gave me a kind of identity that even I could identify myself through, you know, not just that others could identify me through, but that could like make it easier for me to navigate the world, because you can't, or I find it kind of difficult to navigate the world without an identity, because I've tried to be this kind of invisible kind of person that doesn't really, you know, I've traveled a lot, for instance, and I know there's been moments when I try to like be really quiet or just kind of really observe or just find myself in situations where I don't have to do much and I can just really make myself invisible, because I was trying to look for the essence of things. I was trying to be in a space and like just observe how people were living their lives, but I will always still be there, and the fact that I'm there without any kind of identity is just a little disquieting, and it's probably giving me the least authentic of experiences, if authenticity is what I'm looking for, whatever that is. Like, I cannot be in some stranger's living room and see how they eat their food, and if I'm there without them, knowing that I'm there is just creepy and illegal, right? So like the kind of experience that I'm looking for is ethically questionable, and I don't even want that. Like, and what I've noticed is that then my friends will have this really like big personalities, or that don't think about things too much, or that they just kind of find themselves in situations and people go along with it. They create something new, but then that's even more genuine, because then you're seeing people's like life reaction to a new situation. It's like, okay, you've met this character and you found yourself in this place, and now you're going to do this walk together, and like the conversations that ensue, like that's just a lot more unique, and that wouldn't have happened without either of the parties being there. So at least what you can really aim for in the world is, you know, to be as present as possible, and then like perhaps through that you'll invite people to be as present as possible with you, because God knows that everything around us right now is like keeping us from the moment, you know, like the notifications that pop off on my phone every time, or just, you know, all these labels that, you know, can keep me assured of who I am without me having to do much of the back work of that. But and so yeah, that's that. And it's it's difficult, because now I'm in a moment when all these things are kind of crumbling down, right? Like suddenly it feels like I'm not as good in philosophy as I thought I was. Suddenly I'm not even sure if this is the thing that I want to do anymore, when I thought that I really made the decision to commit myself to this almost for the rest of my life, you know, PhD programs and all that. And it's kind of in the moment where I'm basically not getting into anywhere. And it's also in the moment where the country that I'm in is just showing extreme xenophobia against people from my country, from Venezuelans, that I even wonder, like, I probably won't be able to be here. But then it reminds me of all these discourses that I used to have with myself of, like, I don't even want to study Western academia anyways, because it just doesn't represent me, and it has all these terrible values that I don't, you know, stand for, and whatever. And it's just kind of like a replication of, like, colonial values or whatever. But I still applied because I was like, okay, there's still interesting things happening. It still feels like a straightforward path. It just feels like the place where I belong, given the past that I have. And even if it was like the safest of options, if it felt like a comfort choice for me, life is now showing me, like, whether it is or it isn't, this is just not your path right now. This is just not the place where you have to be, not the place where you belong. And I mean, the fact that I'm not going is not 100% guaranteed yet, because I still have like 2 places to answer me. But 2 places, if you ever do PhD admissions, that's like just such a big gamble that I'm kind of already thinking about my plans, other plans, like what I'll do with my life. And yeah, there's that. So I'm probably not as good as in philosophy as I thought, which is not the immediate conclusion, right? But it's been demotivating to the point where I am questioning if this is what I want to continue doing, like if it's worth it, or if really my path is in another area, which honestly a year ago I would have been like, are you crazy? Like, this is supposed to be my life. And well, back to the piece of gratitude, like the nice thing about it is that I feel like between all the self-loathing and all the like jokes that I make about this on a day-to-day, I'm kind of reaching a phase of being grateful at the fact that I have options, because it does kind of suck to have your future set in stone and to know exactly what you're going to do for the rest of your life, and or at least sign yourself up for that, because what if it didn't work in the way? Like, obviously no decision is completely permanent like that. I think death is pretty permanent, but you can drop out of a PhD program, sure, but I know that a big part of me would have just felt an even greater failure starting something that I didn't finish. So a big part of I would be a big part of the pressure to um, complete that path that I place myself upon. And maybe this is a moment for me to reflect that, if in the future I find myself in these situations, like, I'm allowed to change, I'm allowed to do other things, like I should be flexible with myself, because why would I imprison myself, unnecessarily? Even though I feel like constraint is something I know very well, from my childhood or whatever, and, from just like being the person that I am. But why would I inflict it to myself? Anyway, I'm grateful that I get to have options now. I'm grateful that I get to be confused. I guess I'm grateful that I am not this one thing that I've always told myself that I was. I'm grateful that I get to discover who I am to become, and that the path to the future is unclear. To be fair, it's always been, even like with the scholarships too, I would have never guessed that I was going to be that kind of academic person, because I sucked at high school. And I sucked because I hated it. And then I found a kind of education that I liked, but then I kind of hated it again. I mean, it's my last semester of college, senioritis, blah, blah, blah. But also, I'm just noticing that to pass, you just have to know how to pass. Like, it's not about knowledge at all. And some of the classes I've enjoyed the most, it has had nothing to do with the way that the grading works and whatever. And I posted an essay on Substack about Western education has failed me, just saying some obvious things like, passing is just a formula. Learning is something completely different, and it has nothing to do with it. And I've learned in so many non-academic environments, and I've learned from so many cool people that I've learned through academia, but they didn't really have anything to do with the grading and the class and all that stuff. It's just kind of like when I learned about their lives, and when we had conversations that were relevant about things that, really matter about the world, and the way that we feel, and the way that our communities are affected, and the way that we are affected by values that don't represent us, but that we have to follow in order to stay afloat in systems. Like, these things are the things that really bring me life. And so the fact that I went through a very academic path is not something I could have ever guessed. The fact that it is kind of ending now, or at least it seems like it is also something that I wouldn't have been able to guess. And I think it's because I'm the kind of person that I need time to get comfortable with something, Like, for instance, I'm dog sitting right now in someone's house. It's the second time. The first time I came over to like just look after their dogs, I was like, you know, so uncomfortable in this space, and I was just not able to do anything or just feel comfortable here because obviously it's not my house. Um, but just kind of like weird discomfort, right? And then this is the second time, and now I'm a lot more chill, like I took a nap on the couch type thing, you know? Which sounds like it's nothing, but to me it's like everything. Like, what do you mean I just like took a nap on this stranger's couch while they're not here? Even though it's perfectly fine for me to do it. But it took me like a whole second time to come here. I lived in France for a year, and for the first like 4 months of that year, oh my god, like I just couldn't really walk the streets comfortably. Like I could only go to the places I knew. I always needed Google Maps. I always needed to know that someone I knew was gonna be somewhere before going. The rest of that time, oh my god, I was going everywhere alone. I was walking those streets, at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. or no matter the time. I was just, making friends, making memories, traveling so much, going everywhere. It led me to solo traveling as well. Had great adventure. But it took me a whole year. Like if I had only gone for those 4 months, I wouldn't have been comfortable at all. And I think that's just normal in life. Like you need time to adapt. I have friends who are faster at adapting to situations. But I feel like similarly with my life paths, the first couple of years of my academic life, at least in college, I feel like I was just so getting used to the life in the US and just kind of being in college and what classes look like and interacting with adults that like are meant to have a closer role in your education because it's a small liberal arts school and whatever that looked like. And that was my last year, and I'm like, okay, I don't really care because this doesn't I realize that it doesn't represent me that much anyway, so I have the comfort to just do whatever else and go out alone to the city and study at my own rhythm and kind of fumble some essays and some exams and say like it's okay. It's not that deep. So I think it will take me some time again to get used to whatever the next step is, because obviously I'm not going to be a college student anymore, and I think there's just a certain comfort in being a college student that doesn't need to have anything figured out. But I do feel that pressure, mostly for myself, but also my parents a little bit telling me like, I just don't want you to be lost, I don't want you to be wandering without a plan, because that can lead to dissatisfaction and like it can be kind of hard. And also the fact that at least my dad perceives me as someone who's always on the go, and he's like, I don't want you to feel unfulfilled like if you like just lay still for too long. And I'm like, am I that kind of person? Like, why do I give myself the vibe that I could just like lay forever and do nothing and be fine with that? But then I look at my life and it's nothing like that. Like I'm constantly on the move, I'm constantly doing something, I'm constantly having a project. Like why are these things not matching? And I think that comes back to the fact that I've always had who I was so clear that I never put the effort in meeting myself, And that's something I'm kind of trying. I've been trying to do it in the last couple of months, the last year, and really figuring out who am I? Like, do I write poetry? Do I paint? Do I like quiet time? Do I like a lot of friends? Am I shy, or am I simply in my thoughts a lot? I am not afraid of talking to strangers. I can start a conversation with anyone, but sometimes there's just a lot happening here to put it out there. Or it just takes me longer, and the world is so fast-paced. Like, people want to get to know each other so fast and have all these really long short conversations, and it has to be like, oh my god, hi, blah, 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 blah. And there's like just no patience to actually get to know each other. Like, I cannot tell you everything that's happening here. That's why I probably fumbled that PhD interview as well, because in order to really put out there what I'm thinking or who I am, like, I need us to go further than like 3 questions in 15 minutes. What do you know about me? Like, really nothing. And I needed time to warm up. And if I cannot adapt to a kind of system that is so fast paced, then maybe it's just not the kind of system for me. And I think that's okay. It doesn't reveal anything about, my intelligence or my capacity. it just says that I like to comprehend things. I like to take my moments before jumping to conclusions, because I feel like that's something that I used to do a lot. That it's a habit that I kind of try to get rid of, and sometimes it comes back. But generally, I try to actively not form fast opinions or judgments, quick judgments and things. There can be an initial thought, like, let's say, I don't know, whatever. Look at this and I'm like, I don't know, ugly color. But then maybe like we talk about why that color was chosen for this kind of tape, and that it's like a signifier for, the stronger tape versus the beige one that is more like classroom tape, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, this thing doesn't really require judgments of beauty, it's like, or at least it should be so contextualized. Like if I see this on a piece of paper because it's holding it together on a wall, then I'm not gonna think ugly or pretty. But if I see it and it's kind of part of your outfit, then okay, maybe I'll make it into aesthetic judgment, But in other contexts, it just doesn't fit. So it's just kind of about, and this started since I started studying hermeneutics, that it leads you to, it's the philosophy of interpretation, and it's all about like understanding everything. So like why do we perceive things the way that we do, and like what do things really mean, and like what meaning we're adding to things versus the meaning that the thing is trying to give to us. And this is like Gadamer, but whatever. Since I learned reading about these things, and I think a lot about the things that I think, very German romantic extravaganza. It gets overwhelming. But the good thing about it is that it's given me this time to dig deep into who I really am and what I mean when I say things, and if like the things that I say, are they mine or have they been given to me and I've just taken them as mine, but they weren't really mine in the first place. Yeah. Because at first I used to love to know how I was perceived. I used to love to know if people thought that I was like funny or calm or like extroverted or whatever, because then it allowed me, it saved me so much work, because I didn't want to dig deep into who I was, and because I didn't like myself either. So I was like, if someone can just do the work for me and I can continue to feel invisible in this body and just pull labels out there so that people don't notice this invisibility, but I can just comfortably exist in society in a body, because I don't want to not exist in this antisocial sense. Like I am very intrigued by human relations, and I am so intrigued by just the world and how people interact in it and everything, but sometimes it's hard to do that myself. And I think part of my shell, in order not to do that, is just allowing other people to like assign me values, and then like I'm like, these are the values that present me. It's kind of like an interpreter. Like, hi, I'm Python. You just give me some freaking code, and I'm like, yeah, this, I give you an output, and this is who I am, and I don't have to think about who I am. I don't know how often Python thinks about who it is. I'm doing computer science 1. If I fumble that, that's why. I know nothing about Python. But the point is that maybe I do kind of like myself, and even though sometimes things are confusing, and part of healing that relationship with myself is being kind and accepting that not because all the doors are opening in the way that I wanted them to. First, it doesn't mean that I really wanted them to open that way. Second, it doesn't mean that I am not capable of doing these things. It just means that it's really not my path. And it means that I have so many other options, and I have such a huge opportunity to get to know myself, And I'm 24. Like, I am pretty young. What a blessing it is to have this opportunity right now, rather than like being 65, which is still, super valid age to discover yourself again. And I hope that this is not like, a static process. I hope that I always continue to evolve, and even at 65, I'm like, okay, who am I now? But at least like that this process is beginning now is a great thing, allowing myself to really meet myself, to spend time with myself and say, what do you want from life? Also, if this is making noises, because This is my anxiety tool, you guys. To say, what do I want from life? To, take myself out for coffee and, meet myself. I don't know. I don't want to let other people do that for me. But I want to introduce myself to people. But I need the certainty first of who is being introduced. Like, I am being introduced, but as what? Things feel very wonky right now and shaky in terms, like in epistemological terms and in ontological terms too, which is epistemological is like knowledge, like of the things that I know. It's so wonky, and ontology is of being, so of the things that I am, also super wonky. But I wrote a poem, speaking of poetry, because okay, so it was supposed to be first this like philosophy video, because sometimes, well, I used to do it, but I kind of stopped. I used to do these philosophy videos on TikTok where I would just kind of do my makeup and talk about philosophy, and they're really cool, but it was just so much work. But I kind of like this chill format. So anyway, I started writing a script for that to do another one, but then like I just kind of wrote 3 sentences and left it like that. But then I found out about this poetry competition that is coming up in a bar that is really cool in Chicago. And the guy told me to have like 5 or 6 poems prepared. And I'm getting more into spoken word kind of things, not just like reading a poem, but just kind of engaging a crowd in poetry, or doing something to evoke a reaction rather than just reading something out for the pure, aesthetic purposes of it, like most of my poetry has always been. So maybe this is an evolution of my poetry, but the point is, this is a poem about nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre, who is this French existentialist philosopher, and nausea is his novel, and it talks about this feeling of like just nausea, of being alive, this kind of wonkiness, blah blah. So I'm just gonna read it. It's supposed to emulate that kind of feeling that the novel talks about. Something has happened to me. I can't doubt it anymore. And with this sentence begins Sartre's novel, Nausea. We follow the journal entries of the historian Antoine Roquentin. Through the book, we follow glimpses of his life, ordinary and rather repetitive. He goes to the same cafe, the same library, walks down the same streets, and finds the same kinds of characters. Do you ever wake up from the mundane? You look around, you feel yourself looking through your eyes. Your limbs are alien tools. You realize you've never seen the entirety of yourself, only what the mirror shows you. Faces become shapeless, words become distorted, noises mixing all together. Life doesn't seem so predictable anymore. The nausea. If you've ever felt this way, you might find refuge in Sartre's novel Nausea, an existentialist work where we follow the journal entries of the historian Antoine Roquentin. His life is rather mundane, but as he experiences himself experiencing the world, in other words, when he feels the nausea of existence, the novel invites us to question everything that is otherwise normal for us. Do you ever sleep from the absurd? Shut your eyes when life becomes unpredictable, run away from the discomfort of existing. Do you notice that every day is the same and yet it feels so different? You exist in your body and you live to distract yourself from this fact every single day. How many espresso martinis until you forget that you're a human? You're drawn to the eyes and the faces unknown, the only glimpse of a soul to keep you away from not madness. The Nausea. A novel by Sartre where Antoine Roquentin follows your life as you wish for a mundane life in your ever-increasingly absurd existence. So that was that. Give it up for identity searching. And I'm grateful that I get to try again tomorrow.